Well, welcome back to another Nourish bonus episode. These episodes are designed to encourage you in this busy stretch of the year and to help us think intentionally about how we might establish those spiritual rhythms and those disciplines that help us in life, in health, in wholeness, in faith as we journey towards greater intimacy with Jesus and greater connection with each other. So today we're talking about on living with intention, and I've got Jo and Gabi back with me again today, which is awesome. They joined me on an earlier episode, which you can find if you just have a little scroll through our podcast list there. We talked about how to keep our spiritual tanks full. And today we're talking about what it means to live with intention. So just as a way of setting that up, life with Jesus is an invitation to intentional living. We're not invited to be merely spectators in the world, but to be active participants in God's kingdom mission. At Discovery, we call it his biggest story. And we're called to glorify him in all things. So for us as disciples of Jesus, that means living with intention in every area of life, from how we steward our call, our purpose, our gifts that are unique to us, how we be intentional in our relationships with others, how we're cultivating healthy, thriving marriages and families. What does it mean to parent and disciple our kids intentionally in today's day and age? And what does it look like to be intentional in our workplaces, with our resources, and even with our physical health and fitness and well-being? Which is a good one and a challenging one. So, the question is, how does Jesus model rhythms of discipline in his life, and what can we learn from him as well? So let's jump into the conversation. Why don't we start today with just a simple question for you guys to kick us off. What does just a simple question, what does living with intention mean to you?
I think for me it's that setting a course and moving towards it, whether that's at a run or a crawl or, some stumbles along the way, but you still have your eye on a destination that you hope you'll get to one day.
Yeah. It's doing things on purpose, isn't it? Not just bumbling along and hoping for the best. But, like you said, setting those goals and what kind of person do I want to be in the years to come? What do I want my family to look like? What do I want my social life to look like? What do I want to say about my career and the choices that I made in my vocation? All of those things. And how do I make very small, perhaps, like you said, sometimes just crawling. How do I make small changes now to get there?
Yeah, that's awesome. For me, I think about being mindful and discerning about the person God's called me to be in the world.
Yeah.
And if I can answer that question, it helps me work backwards to go, well, what things do I need in place, or what spaces and environments do I need to be in order to be the truest version of that person. But that's great. I love that. Living with intention, doing things on purpose, setting a course. So for you guys, are there certain areas in life right now where you feel like you're doing that really well?
Yeah, I think I am parenting with intention. At this point in time, I have 3 little people, 6, 4, and almost 2. And there's a lot of development that happens in those very early years. And so I have become much more intentional about a lot of different things, talking about Jesus and how we integrate Jesus into daily conversation with kids, but emotional regulation, acknowledging feelings, all this very, hard work that we're also doing in ourselves as well. But I feel like I'm doing that well. I'm seeing the fruit of that in my kids, which is really beautiful. And other people see the fruit of that in my kids too, which is really nice. And so, together, with my husband, we have taken a very intentional approach, reading books, following different people on Instagram that can really help us, give us little nuggets, here and there to help us do intentional parenting really well.
That's awesome.
I think I'm in a season where work's back on the agenda a bit more than it was more tent making when I was with very small children. But we've had some work changes in the last few years, and so I'm kind of re-entering. But this time I know a bit more about who I am. I know a bit more about how I respond in certain environments and what feels like, I think you were talking about last episode, what feels like a space where it's just very natural, it's flow. You can do it with a relative ease and it's life-giving, even though for someone else it might be really tough and terrifying, but that bit for you is okay. And so I'm just trying to bring that experience into new roles and make good decisions about, you know, like any job or any role, any volunteer position, anything, you could invest a ton of time in something that doesn't bear a whole lot of, you know, you could tick off all the boxes, but it's not that fruitful. And for me, just trying to find those few areas where I go, well, that's where I'm all in. And there's some other areas I'm going to do a very, like, just good enough job. Apologies for the marking, all my students. It's very late. That's not the main thing. But, yeah, trying to be really intentional about what I commit myself to in work and vocation space at the moment. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. I love that. Such good encouragement. Gabi, I was thinking before when you were sharing about being intentional in your parenting, I really enjoy watching you share what you're learning on your own social media, because you're very intentional about sharing that journey of parenting intentionally with others in a way that's very inclusive and encouraging. So well done.
Yeah, thank you.
And if you don't follow Gabi, you should follow her. She's got some really good things on there. But I think it's great, like, to be able to share your learning in a way that's empowering for others and doesn't make others feel like, oh, I'm not doing well enough. Like, I really love the way you approach that.
Thank you.
So, yeah, great to just want to encourage you with that.
Thank you.
So that's awesome. It's great to hear what you feel like you're doing really well in. What is the biggest struggle for you when it comes to living with intention? Because I know, like, we all have things that we naturally we're like, yeah, that's not too hard for me to be intentional about that. But there are things that we're like, why is this always hard for me?
Yeah.
Can I just say food?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I, like,
I love food.
it's such
I love
a,
food too.
I love food. I love I love foods that probably aren't that helpful for my body a lot of the time. It's something that I struggle a lot with. Is just making better choices with my food. And it's such a small thing, but it's like, it's a big thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't do that very well intentionally. I mean, you know, I grocery shop, and the funny thing is I do it really well for my kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, my kids' lunch boxes are amazing. They're really good. They're really well thought out. There's, you know, all the different food groups and nude food and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. But for me, I gatekeep berries for my children.
Like, don't like to have those there for the kids' lunch boxes. But
Yes. I treated myself to a punnet of blueberries the other day because I was like, yes, these are good. These are health. You know,
have
watch me
these.
go.
Yeah.
Look at me eat a punnet of blueberries to myself without any children's little tiny fingers in there. But yeah, that's something that I need to improve my intentionality in, is just making better choices to keep my body healthy and thriving.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, look, I think there's a few areas in life that are on autopilot that I just know that's how we do that. For me, exercise. Look, food could be in there. Look, that's all part of the same cycle. But exercise, you know, the busyness of life and all of that, it often is okay, but I notice it is the first thing that crashes when I'm not going so well.
When the schedule gets full.
Yeah. When I'm over it, when life is hard, it's not something I wake up with instant motivation for. Yeah, but it's so helpful when I'm in a better rhythm and I'm being intentional with it. It's like superpower, but for some reason I don't do it all the time. It's annoying.
We're so quick to give up things that we actually know in our heads and our hearts will be good for us. And you know, instead keep the things in that aren't actually very replenishing, because when you're tired and you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, the effort of thinking about running for 5Ks or whatever you do, walk for 30 minutes, do Pilates, whatever's your jam, can just feel like too much. I feel like I'm in my early 40s still. I was just deciding whether I'm mid-40s.
Early 40s can last
now
for
that I'm
quite a
43.
while.
Am I closer to mid-40s? I think I'm still early 40s.
No, you've got
Early
another
until
year.
you turn 45.
But when I turned 40, I felt like one of the things that I was reflecting, just, as you do when you have a milestone birthday, thinking about what have I loved about the last decade, and what do I sense the invitations for the new decade to be. And one of the things I felt like the Lord speak to me about was stewarding my health and fitness. I've always really quite enjoyed sport and that sort of thing. But as you go through different seasons of life and family, it's not as easy as it once was just to go play a game of netball or whatever you're doing. And so I just had gotten out of that rhythm. But learning and getting I think it was the revelation of, for everything that I feel like is in my life to do and that the Lord has invited me to, I actually can't do that if I'm not stewarding my own health and well-being and my fitness.
And
I
it's
will
often
not be
the bonus.
able to.
We think we can just add it on.
Yeah, it's the things,
whatever.
Having a healthy, strong body gives me the energy to do those things. And so I'd never really thought about it like that before, but starting to see how integrated that is into my spiritual life. It's not just over here as a separate fitness bucket. It actually is scaffolding that releases me to do all the other things in my life, parenting, leading at church, whatever it might be. And
It's
so
a really good way to
having
frame it.
a reframe of that. Not that I'm definitely not I love food too, or cheese is my guilty pleasure. But, it's awesome. So living with intention, I feel like Scripture's full of encouragement on this particular issue. There are so many stories all through Scripture, particularly in the Gospels, around discipline, whether it's what Jesus modelled or so much of Paul's writing is focused around encouragement, around that self-control, disciplining our bodies as a temple of the Holy Spirit, something to be stewarded, something that's not actually our own, but that has been entrusted to us. And not even just our bodies, but our time, our resources. It extends over every area. So my question is, why is this such a focus in Scripture? Why does it matter so much? Why can't we just take the approach of, well, whatever comes,
There's grace,
and I'll just roll with it and sort of take it every day as it comes? Why is living with intention so important? Why does it matter?
I think about Mary and Martha and who was it that was serving? Martha.
And was busy.
Mary was
She
sitting.
was busy, and she was intentionally doing that. But I think the intention of Mary of sitting at Jesus' feet, what's the why behind the what? And I think we can be very busy and doing lots of things, and it's all just so misdirected.
Yeah.
We were just talking, it's funny you bring this scripture up, we were just talking about this as a team yesterday, and driving home on the Hume a couple of days ago, if you've ever driven from Sydney to Melbourne on the Hume, it's the most boring drive you'll ever have. It's a straight line for hundreds and hundreds of kilometres. Weirdly, though, I often feel like the Lord speaks to me on that road, maybe because there's nothing else exciting to look at. There's a lot of clarity. But I was reflecting on that story of Mary and Martha as well, and in that scripture it says something like, Martha was busy with preparations that she thought were necessary. And she thought were necessary. Yeah. And I thought, how often do we make decisions about what we think are necessary preparations versus what God thinks is necessary preparations? And then I thought about the story in Luke chapter 2 when Jesus is in the temple and Mary and Joseph can't find him, and then they eventually find him, and he says something to them like, why would you not know that I was here? Don't you know I need to be about my Father's business?
He was so directed.
Directed. And I thought particularly coming into this season of the year, the freight train to Christmas is real. It just picks up speed.
Choo-choo.
And we can really quickly, and I was encouraging our team with this yesterday because, Christmas time in church world gets very busy,
Yep.
and we can easily become about lots of business that's not actually the Father's business.
Yeah.
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 And so I feel so we were just reminding ourselves of that, and how do we stay focused on the Father's business as we come into this end of the year. But I think it's relevant for us in our personal lives when we think about living with intention, what we think is necessary and what actually the Lord's asking of us or inviting us to are two different things.
Yeah.
And we can get really busy and distracted with things that he never asked us to do. And then we're upset because we're tired and overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And often
He's like,
he's
I
there,
never asked you to do that.
pick that up and carry that.
Yeah. I asked you to come and sit with me and let's work this out together.
Yeah.
Let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like worst case scenario, almost we can nail it and get everything done, and then we don't need God. And then we have ticked all the boxes and gone, didn't I do a great job?
Yeah.
It's almost a curse if you are highly capable and successful at getting stuff done. It's almost better to let the things go and have to trust Jesus will carry you. It's not an excuse for unpreparedness, I know, but I think I look at scripture and I think it's all written to communities. Everything we hear is very individual. When we don't live with intention, I think we rob ourselves of the kind of investment in our communities that God hopes for us. And we rob our communities of our best selves. There's so much of the laws of the Old Testament that are about making sure that they are a light to other people and that they're keeping their house together, in a sense. All those laws in the Ten Commandments about not committing adultery and not hurting each other in community, they're disciplined so that we can live out into the world to others as whole people. And even Jesus, surrounded by community, he did all that he did, but he still had his mates. He had his 12, and within that he had his 3. And he was always in community and living intentionally into those relationships. And I just don't think you can have good relationships without intentionality. And if you don't have relationships, then how are you loving? And if you're not loving, then how are we what is the point of our following God, The risk is that without being intentional, we do whatever we feel like on the day and end up very lonely and very uncommunity,
Yeah. So what are some of the things, it's easy to talk about, oh, yes, we should all be intentional, but what's the process? So you talked to Gab before about wanting to be really intentional in your parenting. So what's your process for that? Like how do you what did you decide, you and Vin together? What made you go, we want to be really intentional with this, and so we're going to do these things?
Yeah. I don't know. I think to be perfectly honest, a lot of the parenting stuff was kind of driven by me in the beginning of like, we've got a bit of a wild child in the middle there. And I was like, I need
middle
to,
children.
my eldest is very much like me. She wasn't hard work in terms of, helping her to grow up to be, a decent human being as a 6-year-old, no pressure kid, sorry. But my second child was very different from my
usually
first.
are.
Yeah, apparently so. Yeah. And so she was kind of my trigger point for going, okay, well, what worked for the first one didn't work for the second. And I really I don't want to just tell her to shush and do it the same way as her sister, because that's not honouring who God's created her to be. And so how do we work with her and draw out the beauty of who God has created her to be, whilst helping her move past the things and work with the things that work against her, like we all have them.
Oh, yeah.
And so how do we, obviously she's such an incredible person, how do we draw out the beauty and help her work past the other bits? And so that was where I guess the intentionality started, was with a second child that was like, whoa, okay. And then it's kind of morphed from there into, all of the how do we do that?
When I was a young mum, I remember someone saying to me, you're raising adults, not children. And I have never forgotten that. At first I didn't like it because I thought, no, hang on a minute. I want them to have a childhood and enjoy
Yeah.
being. And then I realised I'd misunderstood what they were trying to communicate to me.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
And I've really have valued that now having teenagers because thinking back, I think it helped us at the time to be really intentional about what experiences we wanted our children to have that we knew would be helpful for them in terms of the adults we wanted to see them grow into.
Yeah.
It's interesting thinking about now. We've made a decision when they were really little to raise independent people.
Yep.
And now, all of a sudden, they're 16 and 14 and they are becoming very independent people. And I'm wishing that maybe I didn't. This is happening faster than I wanted.
You know the mum, I got this.
Yeah, please still love me. But yeah, it's funny how you make these decisions and then you start to live in the fruit of those decisions, for better or worse.
Yep.
But who are you learning from when you know, whether it's from a parenting point of view, whether it's from how you're being intentional in the workplace, like what inspires you, who inspires you? What have been the moments that have been like the catalyst moments where you've been like, hang on a minute, I actually want to be really switched on in this space. Like something's clicked for you and you're like, actually, I don't just want life to happen to me. I want to be on the front foot with what God's doing and be partnering with him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it started for us before we were parents, on the parenting track again, but looking at different families, and I'm sorry to say I was judging them. I was. I was using my judgment, I think, is more accurate. There were certain outcomes that I saw that I was like, oof, I'm not sure how I feel about that one. Don't love that one for me. And there were certain families that I was around, I was like, oh my goodness, like how are they doing that? And I think being able to journey with some families for the lifetime of their children, that I held their little babies as their babysitter when I was like 19. And now their kids are coming to my 40th, you know.
That's awesome.
That's really cool to see where they've been. And I think collecting people who you can see the fruit, you know, you look at them and you think, gee, there's fruit in your life.
Yeah.
Where's that coming from? How's that happened? What do you do that I can ask about, or I can steal all of your ideas, basically? And I grew up in a very kind of laissez-faire family. I just don't feel like we had tons of rhythms and rituals. And when I became a Christian and got around kids who were from other Christian families, they're like, you do devotions? What?
Yeah.
Or like, your parents pray for you every night? Or like, there was just all kinds of rhythms, from how do you deal with kids who are being raucous at the dinner table to the deeper rhythms. And I would just pick people's brains. Anytime I saw good fruit, I'd be like, you know, I've got a friend who goes here who's one of 4, and I'm just like, what did your mum do? What did your parents do?
Yeah.
Because I see you and your siblings, and it's going, they're not perfect, but it's going well. You've got 4 kids who follow Jesus and are functional adults.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great advice for anyone who's listening who's thinking, maybe I'm not great at living with intention, but I want to grow in this area. Have a look around you at where the fruit is. You know, it might be in your workplace. What does it look like to be a Christian in the workplace and to be part of God's mission in that place, not just turn up to work, do the 9 to 5, go home again.
Yeah.
It might be in parenting. It might be in relationships, in marriage, in finances.
Yeah.
You know, Shane Willard says, he has this amazing little quote that he says, and I feel like it's almost a throwaway, but it's actually so powerful. He says, what's hallowed in private is witnessed in public. And I love that because it reminds me of what you were just saying. When you can see the fruit of intentionality in someone's life, because you can see it in the way they're stewarding their finances, or the way they, you know, the success that they're seeing in the workplace or in their business, or, you know, the health that's in their family or their marriage. Those things are very obvious. And so when you see that in somebody, there's something about the humility to go up to that person and say, hey, can I learn? Can I take you out for a coffee? And can I just have an hour of your time to ask you how you're doing that?
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, that's the greatest way we learn is from one another, and being able to identify, who's somebody that looks like they're doing really well in that area that I want to grow in. That's maybe a struggle for me.
Yeah.
And what can I learn from that person?
Yeah.
And maybe even offering to serve them. Like, that's the best way, because those people are often busy. But me babysitting for my friends Rick and Karen when their kids were young, I just got to watch
what they did.
and I watched when their kid, piffed a packet of crayons at the wall or
and how they responded.
I watched when my friend Karen was super busy at work, or I watched them have arguments as a couple. Not freaky watching, not like but I was around them, so I saw stuff.
Yeah.
And I think maybe as young people, if we can get around and offer to serve and just do the gardening or just do some babysitting or whatever, and get around people who are doing life well. And at work, you can offer to work alongside that person who you think's doing well, and you'll probably glean so much from them just watching, I reckon. Yeah.
Yeah. Things are more easily caught than they are taught.
Yes,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So there's some really, I think about some of the simple things when you're thinking about how do I live more intentionally, and particularly coming into the end of the year. I don't know if you do this. One of the things that I tend to do over the summer break is kind of harvest the year that's been and pull out what are the things that I really loved about this year, what were the wins, what brought me joy, also what were the challenges, what were the big lessons of the year. And then I start to peek into the new year and think intentionally about, okay, well, if I was to set myself up to really thrive this year, and if I was to get to the end of the year healthy, happy, feeling like I'd moved closer to Jesus, taken steps forward in my my gifts and not to say that always challenges come and always we have difficult seasons, but if I'm looking at it through that lens, I try to think about, okay, well, what does a monthly rhythm need to look like for me? What are the big rocks? And I think about the big rocks first. What are the big rocks I know I need to be my best self, like the best mum version of me, the best wife version of me, the best leader version of me, the best friend version of me, the best, daughter version of me. What are the big rocks I need? And I start to really do a big
inventory.
Like a calendar, like boring calendar planning.
Calendars are never boring.
Yeah, well,
Always
if you're
good.
a routine lover, they're
Especially
not
if there's
boring. But for some
colours.
people that would feel like, that's not fun at all. But so helpful.
Yeah.
Because if it's not in,
It's not happening.
it's not happening.
Yep.
And at least if it's in, it's easier to move it later than try and put it in later if you didn't have it in the beginning.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's something that I find really helpful just as an end of year, start of year practice. And I also think about what voices do I need in my world this year that are going to help me grow?
Yeah.
Where do I know I need to grow?
Yeah.
And who can help me?
Yeah.
Is a question I ask at the start of the year too. So I'm interested to know, is there anything, any practical things you do, any mindset things that happen in your mind space? What are your practices for coming into a new year and setting your intention, setting your course for the year? How do you do it?
Yeah.
I have a friend of mine who is a counsellor, and she's one of those friends that asks the good questions, the meaty questions. And she actually put together a journal, which was it's a reset journal. So it's looking at the year ahead. And that's been a really beautiful tool that I used a few years ago. And another
And we
thing,
can buy that from what website?
Oh, great question. I'll ask her. It'll be in the show notes. Another thing that she does that I've used years in the past is kind of setting a word for the year and kind of, like a theme for the year, and just spending time praying and asking God, what do you say about this year? Where are you in this year, and what do I need to come back to? And it's interesting the words that kind of come up in that space, and where when you hit different points in the year, when you reflect on that word, what does that mean in this space, know? So that's a really nice kind of tool, a prayerful tool to kind of set the intention for the beginning of the year. But I'm also a big calendar lover. I was even having a conversation with my husband last night about setting, one Saturday in the month for an open house for friends, and it's the same Saturday every month, and it's just, whoever comes, and doing that kind of relationship and inviting relationship very intentionally. It's something that I used to do with some girlfriends. We had the same Saturday every month that we'd go out for dinner, and that was always in the calendar. So even because, again, for mums of small people, that kind of social space isn't always a high priority and not really, always done well. So for me, that was a really helpful thing at the start of the year by saying, I'm committing to these friends. I'm committing to doing life with these guys really intentionally. And so, setting up events right at the very beginning of the year that were in all of our calendars right from the start was something that was really helpful. But yeah, the calendar piece is a big one. I like that.
Yeah. I feel like this has been a good reminder because in years gone by, I did that a lot better. Being teachers, January is often a good time to reset and refocus. I've done it where I've actually gone away up to like a little cabin in Sassafras or whatever for a whole day and just, gotten out a massive piece of paper and just done a big mind dump of all the things and then, talk to God and go for a walk and go eat something yummy and, just really take a day to refocus. And I wish I've done that every year. I would probably be a better person now if I had, but it's reminding me to do that sort of thing again. Sometime in this season, there's been a few rhythms like when we travel to our holiday, we go to Phillip Island a lot, trying to go down at night when the kids are asleep in the car or by myself if Pete and I do a tag team kind of effort and taking some time in the car to kind of fill up the tank, podcast something, think, focus, pray, and then taking it's a little bit, it's a sample size, but like an hour in a cafe, like you're talking about. And just try and say, I'm going to book some stuff, I'm going to journal, I'm going to zoom out for a second. That stuff's been helpful. And I think I really want to echo the intentional relationships piece. I ended up in a spot a few years ago where stuff was really hard in like ministry. I just had a massive fight that day with my husband and we both rocked up to the same because we're both working at the same church. And I was like, ooh! And then I realised all of our friends were in our church community. And so if I was to whinge about my husband to them, he was their pastor, which is uncool. And I realised I had no other friends outside of that. And I cried in the car coming home thinking, I have not prioritised this. I have now no one to talk to about this. And I should have done better. And it really hit me hard and it reset for me. You have to put people in that you say yes to, that you call them in the car or that you do the dinner with when you're tired or whatever, because it's so important. Like for me, relationships are the first calendar and then everything else,
I love that. You're right. It's important to have friends in different spaces in your life that can invest into you when you're, no matter what it is that you're navigating, you just need different people at different times. And just recently, actually, a lot of my closest friends live in another state, and it can be hard because we don't have that. Hey, what are you doing? Come around for dinner, which we were so used to having. And so you have to be really intentional. But I found myself in a spot where I was like, oh, I've really just not. I've been so busy. And so I was chatting to this particular friend and she said to me, and I was super grateful, she's like, I know, let's do this. Every Thursday morning at 8:30, I'll call you while you're on your way to work and I'm on my way to work. And from 8:30 to 9, we'll talk. And so I was like, yes, great.
Done.
This is perfect. Let's do it. And she's so faithful at calling me 8:30. Boom, she's on the phone. I love that. And it's been so good because even though it's like half an hour, it's short, but it's enough because it's every week to be really present with, so how did that thing go, that meeting you had, or that conversation you were having with your daughter or whatever. And it's just been so life-giving. And it made me think, I have that in my calendar because my mum also lives interstate, so I have like it's in my calendar, call mum every second Thursday, 2 o'clock. Because if it's not in there, I like to think I'll remember to do that all the time. And sometimes I spontaneously might be a great daughter and call her more. But sometimes if I'm busy, I'm not thinking about it, and so I have it in there for my sister as well. Call my sister, or I have to put those things in, and they help me. I don't always do it, but it helps me at least think of them or shoot them a message. And to be thinking about like, how do I keep those lines of communication open with the people that you care about. The other thing I've been thinking about is sometimes when we talk about living intentionally, we come at it from the lens of I want to live intentionally so I can fit more in. What I'm learning is, as our time's running out, thanks, Jo. What I'm learning is, the alarm might go off. What I'm learning is that, I'm actually trying to find a rhythm of being less hurried than more hurried.
Yes, please.
But I'm in a really full season of life. But actually making intentional decisions is helping me do that. Not just helping me fit more in, but helping me remove things and have really clear no's.
Sacred times, spaces that are just you don't feel.
And getting really clear on what things I will say yes to makes it easy to know what to say no to without feeling bad about it. I'm a self-confessed people pleaser. It's really hard to say no, especially because I love a lot of things and I love being able to help if I can. And so I just say yes often without thinking about it. And so it's been being a bit more intentional with my why. And what I will say yes to. And so for me, I actually have to have some of that printed up in front of me, at my desk because it at home because it helps me if I'm like about to email and go, yeah, sure, no problem. I have it there and I'm like, hang on a minute, run it through my little pro forma. You know, does it, you know, is this gonna take away from time that I have committed to my family? Is this gonna take away from time that I've said I need to give to that? And it just helps me.
That's great.
Pull things out rather than just fit more things in. But yeah, as we just wrap this up, because the time just goes so fast on these chats once we get going. But it's been great to hear your wisdom and your lessons from the journey on what you're discovering around this idea of intention. Just any final thoughts as an encouragement for those listening as they come into the end of the year and.
Yeah, look, I have this image in my brain from something someone said on a podcast probably. I'm just passing it on. But she was talking about raising children, but I think it applies to a lot of things. She said a lot of people throw seeds to the wind and hope for a garden. What we do in intentional parenting or intentional committing at work, is we plant seeds in the ground and we water them. And so it's not a surprise, you know, when there is a garden. And I just love that image. So maybe if you're thinking about that, where do you want your garden to look in a certain amount of time and where can you plant seeds so that it's more, you can't make the seeds grow, that's God's job, but it's more likely to.
It's good.
Yeah, I think my encouragement would be that intentionality grows over time, you know, like it's not like you are an intentional person or you're not. I used to be a lot less intentional about a lot of different areas of my life. I'm getting better at pinpointing, hey, what about my health and fitness? Hey, what about my parenting? Hey, what about my food choices or my relationships or whatever? And I think a lot of that has come from that kind of Mary and Martha. Stop doing the stuff because it's there to do. Like you're talking about having your, you know, check sheet of does this fit into what God has called me to in this season, and be the Mary who, you know, sits at the feet of Jesus and just listens and learns and, you know, and let that guide your slipstream, you know, this kind of that notion of really slotting into the things that God has called you to and finding that kind of supernatural ease to those things and living in that slipstream of, what God has said for this season.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, ladies, for your honesty. I've really appreciated the authentic conversation and your willingness to share just some of the stories and some of the lessons that you're learning on this good old journey.
It's been a pleasure.
It's awesome.
Yeah,
and thanks
Jody.
for listening. We hope there's been something in here today that is an encouragement for you, maybe just one thing that might add some value and some life and some freshness to your own walk with the Lord and journey of faith. We look forward to having you join us next time on the podcast. See you soon.